one thing I wanted to talk to you about, I know you've talked to some people about the run it back, but I feel like no one's talked to you about the archive set. You didn't make a video going through the plays with Jacob. Like, no one's asked questions about it. And that's one of the things that fascinates me the most, not just because, like, the run it back, almost all of them are huge name players. Like, anyone who is a basketball fan in 2005, 2006 can run through that list and should know every single one. Even the ones who are a little more obscure, like Karen Butler, who Rashard Lewis, who really was on a lot of people's radar once he went to the Magic and was with that Dwight team that made it to the finals. Like, most people know every player in that rare set, but in the archive set, there's so many gems in there. And it blows my mind that people aren't talking about it more, or that people aren't interested in it more. One of the things for me is like the Zebo Top Shot debut. And I'm not the biggest Zach Randolph fan, but in his time, he was such a monster. He was such a physical presence. With those Grizzly teams, he was known as one of the toughest players in the NBA, who was not afraid to get down and dirty, throw his weight around, bump you on defense. I just as an outside guy looking in, who was a Lakers fan and rooting for the Lakers, Zebo was one of those players that I felt like I was just drawn to be a fan of, because how he put his heart into the game. Kyle Korver Top Shot debut, before you have Curry, you have Kyle Korver, and I mean, I know you have Ray Allen and Larry Bird and other people too. Kyle Korver isn't the first great shooter of all time, but I mean, once again, Lakers playing the Jazz in those playoffs, and Kyle Korver just he's coming, he's taking the shot, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you're just pissed when he either wins the game or ties it late in the game, and Kobe has to do something. Those, Darren Williams, another one. I could go down the list of players that maybe have kind of faded from the spotlight, but during that time were such a big part of those teams. And I think Kyle Korver even is such a good example, because he just did that podcast with JJ Redick and was talking about playing with Allen Iverson and being on the 76ers, and how his role was way different than a lot of players with his skill set was at that time, which I think just adds even more context to why a Kyle Korver Top Shot debut as a 76er is a really, really cool thing to have.
Right. Yeah, the archive set was really awesome in a lot of ways. And it kind of was a precursor, I guess, to the Series 3, full commitment to, the craziest plays are going to be in the legendaries and rares, and the slightly more accessible will be the other plays will be in the common set, more accessible to everybody. So you kind of saw that tiering system, I guess, at least in situations where a player appeared in both. I feel like archive set that gave us an opportunity to, cast a wider net. A casual fan at the time, that like you said, they'll know most of the names in the run it back, if not all of the names. But I love the archive set as our place to do those deep dives, because not everything will stands the test of time. A Stromile Swift dunk isn't iconic in 2021. I get that, but Stromile Swift as just throwing down crazy dunks was just a fun small part of the basketball landscape that year. And I think the introduction of the archive set lets us include those. And it's nothing more than a small part of a big set that covers, much larger mint counts, but also even multiple years. So I think that's something we can never put that in a rare. There's some players that make it in the archive that just wouldn't work and run it back. And we understand, when someone is queuing up for a rare pack, maybe you don't want to pull Stromile Swift from your rare pack. I get that. I'm sensitive to that. But if I don't know. I love it. I love it. I was obsessed with the league then. I've always been obsessed with the league, and the way I look at it is like the inclusion of players like Corver and Stromile Swift. Not that those two are necessarily on the same level.
Definitely not.
Like it, but it's here's what it can be. It can be like a nice little treat for fans who are just as obsessed about the league in 0506 and knew more than the 50 most popular players.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a treat for them, or it can be like a learning opportunity for somebody else. Like, and
Yeah.
like I'm not gonna make everybody be like study every play we put into the archive set. Like if it doesn't resonate with you, but like I think it's just so exciting that Top Shot can be kind of a guided tour through history. And if you want the Coles notes, stick the running back. But if you want to get like down and dirty, let's talk about Stromile Swift.
Yeah. No,
you know?
I mean that's the position I was in. I didn't know who, as tapped into the NBA as I was during that time. I did not know who Stromile Swift was, and I think there's one or two other names in there. I had no idea who they were.
Right.
Meanwhile, like someone like a Michael Redd, who's in the rare, like maybe the casual basketball fan doesn't remember him, and he's been kind of lost in time. But I remember Michael Redd, like during that time, being like a good player and someone that people like talked about. Yeah, and I think that part's so cool. I think honestly, a great example of it. I think different people will have different examples of this in the archive set based on like what team they grew up rooting for and watching. But for me, it's the Luke Walton Top Shot debut. Like Luke Walton is not an exciting player. And I mean, nowadays, like there's a lot of like newer fans who probably think of him as like a coach who was on the Warriors or now the Kings, not this player who like weirdly wasn't the best, but like was an incredible passer, but like defense is kind of new. Like, oh, he's going to pass first, but like he has some incredible plays that I still remember to this day without having to look up a Luke Walton highlight reel because like he was such a pass first, like off the bench spark plug sometimes that like would set up Kobe or Lamar Odom for some of their best like shots because he knew where to give it to them and when to give it to them. And so having that Luke Walton Top Shot debut, it probably will never be really worth anything, but that's not like every moment, like the money shouldn't be the driving force behind owning it necessarily. And like having a Luke Walton is kind of cool. Like, I'm not showing it off to my friends maybe, but like it gives you that like completionist like feeling almost. We're like, I've got a piece of this and I got a piece of that. To continue on this path of the archive set, which I'm a huge fan of. I've been scooping them up because I think they're a little cheap right now. And I want to that's one of the sets I definitely want to complete. I noticed you are responsible for giving Smush Parker a moment. And now Smush Parker is someone that Kobe has been quoted saying never belonged in the NBA. He said he was a walk-on that they signed and they didn't want to give real money to get a real point guard. So I kind of want to pick your brain here. Like what made you be like, Smush Parker is the one we got to throw up there? Was there just a little irony behind it, like a little trolling? Because like, I mean, he is like very infamous in his own weird way, like especially for us Laker fans.
I'm very aware of the history of Smush Parker and the Lakers. And like here's what I'll say. Like Smush Parker was started in a backcourt, shared a backcourt with Kobe, like during a very interesting time of Kobe's career for 2 seasons. He started, like he wasn't just like a rotation piece.
He also wasn't allowed to talk to Kobe during practice. So
the Lakers were at a point in their history where they needed to have like Smush Parker starting. They just that's the best for whatever reason. That's the best that they had, and that Smush Kobe beef is infamous. I always felt bad for Smush because that was like peak like heel turn Kobe too. Like you could have put like the nicest like person in the world in that background, and they would, if the Lakers weren't winning games, they just would have been just ripped to shreds. And Smush Parker sort of like absorbed that Kobe intensity for all of us.
Yeah, he was a scapegoat for sure.
Yeah. Oh, for
and then
sure.
he became Kwame Brown later on.
Yeah.
We're just losing our minds about him.
Yeah. So, yeah, and Smush Parker could throw it down too. Like there were a couple of.
I mean, the moment you picked, to your credit, that is a great moment. That is not how I remember Smush Parker. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, wow. Like that. I do not remember Smush Parker having any athletic ability just because he is such like a disdain in my memory. Like,
yeah, you know, and I think as proper record keepers of history, we need to see through the bias. We need to tell it as it is. And I'm not saying this is a particularly memorable or great, you know, chapter in Lakers history, but at that given juncture in time, history is history.
I mean, it was a very historical time in Lakers history for different reasons because I mean, you had Kobe putting up insane point, like insane stats just to try and win the game because the team was so bad. Because he's like, I can't really depend on Smush Parker to put up even 10 points. So I guess I got to go to drop 50. And I mean, like, there's a part of me as a Laker fan and as a dire Kobe fan where it like really sucks that like Kobe's best years were like lost to that, where like he should have more MVPs. He should be like have more. No, he should have dominated that era, and he did stats wise, but it's not reflected with necessarily with championships.
Right.
But I mean, at the same time, maybe we don't get that heel turn Kobe that transformed into the Black Mamba and the Mamba mentality. And I mean, it's what made that 2008, 2009, 2010 finals runs that much more memorable because he did come back from such an incredible low.
Yeah.
So
man, it's a fascinating story, and I loved. Yeah, I think you're right. You don't get to that like final chapter of Kobe, like the wisdom Kobe, without that intense chapter in his career. In a lot of ways, I feel like we owe a lot of appreciation to Smush Parker as the first responders to like the Chernobyl incident. Like hold on, like let's give Smush his flowers while we can, because he did a lot for us. But
oh, that's definitely one way to look at it. Another thing that Smush did for us, and I feel like you have to be aware of this, but if you're not, I'm very excited to introduce you to it. Is he brought the Smushglade to life? Do you know what the Smushglade is?
No.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so after we do this, I'll send you a video and you'll have to watch it in the near future. But Smush Parker has a video where he's showing off his car and he bought an Escalade.
Right.
And he calls it the Smushglade. And he had them take off Escalade on the back and replace it with Smushglade.
Right,
and
as one does.
It's one of as you know, as a starting point guard on the Lakers does. Like that's not it's a big shoes to fill. Like can't just be anybody like walking off the street. But yeah, it's one of the most incredible videos I've ever seen. He uses the term smushterize at one point.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it'll only add to your appreciation for Smush Parker.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to hear what you have to say about that later on.
I love it. Yeah, and I think honestly, even I think just having being able to include these points of in some cases contention and have them represented in the product is fun, because I've had more conversations about Smush Parker than I've had about most of the players in the NBA. It's gotten people talking. The highlight, no one can argue that the highlight is
highlight
worthy of
is incredible.
This fun. And like it or hate it, that was a reality in 05-06 for Lakers fans. And it is painfully re-dredged and put back in front of them, 15 years later. So.
Yeah, well, when the Kwame Brown moment hits the archive set in the future, if you could just give me a week's notice so I can mentally prepare for that, having to look at that on Top Shot, that'd be great.
Now, what would we debut?
Maybe
Lakers
Shim.
Kwame, or would we debut Washington Wizards like playing one-on-one with Michael Jordan Kwame? Like, these are the decisions we
Hopefully
have to make.
Washington Wizards. That would be incredible.
Yeah,
The stories poor Kwame is like had to endure is
yeah,
hilarious, but also you do kind of feel bad for the guy.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, you do, and no, it's just it's so fun to be able to just sort of deep dive and really tell any individual player's story, and like because
yeah,
we think back on like how players were represented in the media, whether it's Kwame or Smush or like Andrew Bynum, like and
yeah.
like if any one of those guys you like focus in on them, like they've got this fascinating story, and
Hmm.
like yeah, I just I love it. I
And
love being
I
able to
think
explore.
that's kind of like how you touched on earlier, but I think that's the coolest part about this archive set. I know a lot of people like are just like, oh, like there are too many moments for this player, and like you're not giving us bottlenecks, but and people are upset about that. But like you get to explore so much more of like that year as a result. And I mean, uh, there's so many Lakers players that I can name that a lot of people who aren't Lakers fans and didn't grow up may not like know that name. Like Andrew Bynum, even like he had a couple years where he was like considered super, super good. But like there's like Sasha Vujicic, there's like I'm trying to think Shannon Brown. Shannon Brown was incredible for like a couple years, like has some incredible highlights. And that's someone who for sure would get like completely lost in like time. But like that one block that Shannon Brown has where he chases someone down and pins it against the backboard and like brings it in,
Yeah,
like that belongs in if you put it in a run it back rare, I think people would be really upset that they got a Shannon Brown, but
right.
that belongs in the archive set, like in the
Yeah,
future.
that's what it's
100%.
there for.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of fun players where
Yeah. And there will be players like that and on every team that I'm not aware of that I'll get to learn about, which I think is really, really cool too.
yeah, I think that's the big part. Like it's just people being receptive to learning why, and I think part of that comes down to us having like an obligation and responsibility to not make moments without a reason. And I feel
Mhm.
like that's sort of been kind of at the top of my strategy list is to really make sure like any moment, and not every moment is going to be the most memorable play of the decade, but like if you don't immediately know, like I don't want people to say, "Well, Top Shot like doesn't know what they're doing," like because that just won't be true. Like I want people to be like, "Okay, I don't get this. Like, why is this? Like maybe it's a gap that I have that I can learn." Like you
Yeah.
don't have to. Like you can just sell it and move on if that's the type of collector you are. Like that's fine too. There's no right or wrong way, but like like I came from Slam before here. Nobody like really like questioned the cover. Like if they didn't really know the player that was on the cover, they'd be like, "Oh, I should probably read about this player." Like
Yeah.
no, it's just like Slam just picks random people to be on the front of their magazine. What are they doing? Like, why didn't they try to not do that? Like,
Why didn't they only make 999 of these magazines? Why can't just everyone buy one? I don't get
yeah, yeah.
it.
It's yeah. So I mean, yeah, it comes down to at the end of the day us really holding ourselves to the highest possible standard of picking why a player is there, whether it's the play or the context. Or, there's a number of things that sort of play into that, but yeah, and doing it time and time again, so that people can really, that sort of trust that we're doing things for a reason is established.